To us, my husband toasted on our 10th anniversary, proposing we renew our vows in front of everyone we knew. I looked him dead in the eye and said, I'd rather renew my passport and leave. The clink of his wine glass against mine was supposed to be a punctuation mark on a perfect sentence. 10 years, a decade of marriage sealed with a toast in our dream house, candlelight dancing on the polished oak of our dining table. Mark was beaming at me. His eyes, the same warm, chocolate-brown eyes I'd fallen for in college, crinkling at the corners. He looked every bit the successful, doting husband. He'd even cooked my favorite meal, a steak seared to perfection, with a side of garlic mashed potatoes that were more butter than potato. Everything was perfect, a meticulously crafted illusion. To us, he said, his voice thick with a sentimentality he usually reserved for major holidays and shareholder meetings. To the best 10 years of my life, and to many, many more. I smiled, a hollow, brittle thing that felt like it might crack my face. I sipped the expensive red wine, letting the bitter notes coat my tongue. It tasted like ashes. For the last 48 hours, everything had tasted like ashes. To us, I echoed, my voice a whisper. He put his glass down, reached across the table, and took my hand. His skin was warm, his grip familiar, and, until 2 days ago, comforting. Now it felt like a brand. Clara, he began, his thumb tracing circles on my knuckles. I've been thinking a lot about this anniversary, about what it means, a whole decade. We've built such an incredible life together. He gestured around the room at the curated art on the walls, the view of the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The house, my career, our friends. It's all because I have you by my side, my rock. I just stared at him, my mind a maelstrom of images, of facts, of a truth so monstrous it had obliterated the woman I used to be. The woman who would have teared up at this speech was gone. In her place was someone cold and sharp, a shard of glass. He mistook my silence for emotional overwhelm. He squeezed my hand tighter. I want to celebrate it, properly. I want to show everyone, show you, how much you mean to me, how committed I still am, even more than the day we first said our vows. He took a deep breath, his chest puffing out with the weight of his grand idea. Let's renew our vows, he suggested, his eyes sparkling with what he clearly thought was a stroke of romantic genius. We could rent out that beautiful vineyard upstate, invite everyone. We'll have a huge party, a second wedding, but even better, because we've already proven we can do it. There it was, the proposal. Not of marriage, but of a lie. A grand, public, expensive performance of a lie. He wanted to stand up in front of all our friends and family and recommit himself to a sacrament he had been desecrating for years. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it almost made me laugh. My heart, which I thought had been pulverized into dust, gave a painful, angry lurch. I slowly pulled my hand from his. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I picked up my wine glass, took another slow sip, and set it down with a deliberate, soft click. I met his gaze, and for the first time I didn't try to hide the frozen wasteland behind my eyes. I'd rather renew my passport and leave, I answered. The silence that fell over the table was absolute. It was heavier than stone, sucking the air and the candlelight and the warmth right out of the room. The confident, romantic man from 30 seconds ago vanished, replaced by a stranger with a slack jaw and wide, uncomprehending eyes. The crinkles at the corners of his eyes were gone. He looked lost. "What?" he finally stammered, his voice a fraction of its usual confident baritone. "Clara, that's not funny. What are you talking about?" "Funny?" I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. It was chillingly calm. "No, I don't suppose it is. My passport expires in 6 months. I checked this morning. I figure that's just enough time to get the express renewal, liquidate my assets, and book a one-way ticket to somewhere you can't find me." He shook his head, a gesture of frantic denial. Liquidate your... Clara, stop it. You're scaring me. Did I do something? Did I forget an important date? Whatever it is, I'm sorry. We can fix it. Just talk to me. Oh, we're going to talk, I said, leaning forward slightly. The hunter in me, an instinct I never knew I possessed, was awake now. But first, I want to show you something. It's funny, actually, the lengths men will go to hide things. You think you're so clever, with your locked desk drawers and your business trips. I reached down beside my chair and picked up my handbag. It felt impossibly heavy. I placed it on the table and unzipped it. Mark watched my every move, his face a mask of pale confusion and dawning dread. He was starting to realize this wasn't a joke. This wasn't a mood swing. This was an execution. I was looking for the deed to the house on Tuesday, I explained, my voice conversational, as if I were describing a trip to the grocery store. For the refinancing paperwork, it wasn't in the filing cabinet where it's supposed to be. So I went to your office. I had to check your desk. The bottom drawer was locked, which was odd. I found the spare key in your golf bag, by the way. You should find a better hiding spot for your next life. His face went from pale to ghostly white. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Inside the drawer, I continued, my hand now inside my purse, my fingers closing around cold, smooth leather, was a box, a shoebox, and inside the shoebox, well, there were a lot of things. Bank statements for an account I've never seen, a deed to a condo in Scottsdale I didn't know you owned, and this. I pulled it out. It was a man's wallet, brown leather, slightly worn. It wasn't the black designer one I'd bought him for his last birthday. I slid it across the polished oak table. It stopped directly in front of his plate of perfectly cooked, now cold steak. He stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. His hands were trembling. Go on, I urged, my voice soft, dangerous. Open it. See what our perfect 10 years have really been about. With a hand that shook so badly he could barely control it, he reached out and flipped the wallet open. Inside, behind the clear plastic window, was a driver's license. It had his picture. His smiling, handsome face, looking about 5 years younger. But the name wasn't Mark Peterson. It was Michael Shaw, and the address was in Scottsdale, Arizona. His head snapped up, his eyes wild with panic. Clara, I can explain. Can you? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Can you explain her? And him? I reached back into my purse and pulled out the photograph that had been tucked behind the fake ID. I tossed it onto the table. It fluttered down next to the wallet. It was a family portrait taken on a sunny beach. There was Mark or Michael, his arm wrapped around a smiling blonde woman. And sitting on his shoulders, grinning a gap-toothed smile, was a little boy who couldn't have been more than 7 years old, a little boy with Mark's chocolate brown eyes. He looked from the photograph to my face, then back to the photograph, a frantic, ping-ponging gaze of pure horror. His mouth opened and closed silently, like a fish gasping for air on the deck of a boat. The name on the fake ID, Michael Shaw, seemed to be branded on his soul. The carefully constructed walls of his 2 lives were not just cracking. They were being sledgehammered into dust right before his eyes. Clara, he finally choked out, his voice raspy. He pushed the wallet and the photo away from him as if they were radioactive. Clara, please. It's not what it looks like. A short, sharp bark of a laugh escaped my lips. It was a foreign sound, ugly and humorless. Not what it looks like? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. Are you kidding me? It looks like you have a whole other family, Mark. A wife, a son, a whole separate identity in another state. Tell me, what part of this am I misinterpreting? It's complicated, he stammered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time all evening. It was a long time ago. A mistake. A mistake? My voice rose, the calm facade finally starting to fracture. That boy, Leo, he looks about 7. We've been married for 10 years. Do the math for me, Mark. At what point in our marriage did you make this 7-year-long mistake?" I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table. "Her name is Sarah, isn't it? Sarah Shaw. She's a pediatric nurse. You met her on a business trip to Phoenix 9 years ago. You told her you were a widower, that your first wife died in a car crash. How tragically romantic of you." Every detail I recited was a new blow, and I could see him physically flinching. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy, sallow sheen under the warm candlelight. How do you know all that?" "I'm a good researcher," I said flatly. "When I found the wallet, I didn't stop there. I found the bank statements for the secret account you funded, the one you used to pay the mortgage on your little Scottsdale love nest. I found her social media. It was public. So many happy pictures of the Shaw family. Trips to Disneyland, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. It's all there, Mark. A complete documented history of your betrayal." He shook his head, desperation clawing at his features. "No, Clara, you don't understand. I love you. You are my life. That was something else. It got out of control." "My life?" I scoffed. "Which life is that? The one here in Chicago, in our dream house? Or the one with the tire swing in the backyard in Arizona? Tell me, when you were with him, with Leo, did you ever wish he was ours? Was that why you were so adamant we wait to have children, because you already had one?" That question hit him like a physical punch. He slumped back in his chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a look of utter desolation. He couldn't even meet my eyes. He just stared at his untouched steak, the symbol of the perfect anniversary dinner that had become a funeral pyre for our marriage. "I was going to end it," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I swear. I didn't know how. I never wanted to hurt you." "You never wanted to hurt me?" I stood up then, the chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. The sound was violent in the stillness. "You didn't want to hurt me. You have spent nearly the entirety of our marriage lying to my face every single day. Every 'I love you,' every kiss, every single time you walked out that door for a business trip was a lie. You didn't just hurt me, Mark. You erased me. You took the last 10 years of my life, the life I dedicated to us, to building this, and you revealed it to be a complete and utter sham. My life with you is fiction." He looked up at me then, and I saw a flicker of the old Mark, the ruthless businessman who could charm and bully his way through any negotiation, a cornered animal baring its teeth. "You went through my private things. You invaded my privacy. You had no right." "I had no right?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. "You bring another woman and a child into our marriage. You build a second life on a foundation of lies paid for with money I helped you earn. And you want to lecture me about my rights. The moment you created Michael Shaw, you forfeited every right you ever had with me." He stood up too, his hands gripping the back of his chair, his knuckles white. "We can fix this, Clara. I'll end it. I'll leave her. I'll never see them again. It will be just us. We can go to counseling. We can save this. I love you. I've always loved you, and only you." His words, which once would have been my entire world, were meaningless now. They were just sounds, empty air. He was a stranger. Worse than a stranger. He was the architect of my ruin, and he was trying to sell me on a renovation. I let the silence stretch, watching the pathetic, desperate hope flicker in his eyes. He actually thought he could talk his way out of this. He thought his charm, the same charm he'd used to build 2 separate lives, could somehow glue the pieces of my shattered heart back together. I calmly walked around the table until I was standing right in front of him. I looked him dead in the eye, and I let him see all the contempt, all the disgust, all the pity I felt for the pathetic man he was. "You're right about one thing," I said softly. "You do need to do some explaining, but you're a little late. I imagine you're going to need a much better story than the one you're trying to give me." His brow furrowed in confusion. What are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked the screen and held it up for him to see. It was an active call, the timer showing it had been connected for 2 minutes and 43 seconds. The contact name on the screen wasn't a name. It was just one word: speakerphone. "Sarah picked up on the second ring," I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice. "She's a very light sleeper. She's been listening for the last few minutes. Go on, Mark, or Michael, or whoever the hell you are. Explain to your other wife why you're having an anniversary dinner with your first one." The blood drained from Mark's face so fast I thought he might faint. His eyes, wide with sheer, unadulterated panic, darted from my phone to my face and back again. The screen glowed with the active call, a digital testament to the implosion of his meticulously compartmentalized world. A tiny, tinny voice, distorted by the speaker, but unmistakably female and laced with confusion, trickled from the phone's speaker. "Michael? Michael, who is this? What's going on?" Mark, or Michael, as he was to her, was frozen solid. It was like watching a statue being carved from ice, his confident posture crumbling, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. He looked at me, a silent, desperate plea in his eyes. He was begging me to hang up, to give him a chance to control the narrative, to spin another lie. I just stared back, my expression unyielding. I had surrendered my power to him for a decade. I was taking it all back tonight. "Answer her, Mark," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a scalpel. "She's talking to you, or is she talking to Michael? It must be so confusing keeping your names straight." "Michael, please, you're scaring me." Sarah's voice came again, more insistent this time, tinged with the rising panic of a woman waking up to a nightmare. "Who is that? Where are you?" He finally moved, lunging for the phone. It was a clumsy, desperate grab, but I was faster. I snatched it back, holding it out of his reach. "No," I said firmly. "No more running. No more hiding. You wanted to renew our vows, remember? You wanted to celebrate our commitment. Well, here it is. Here's your commitment, laid bare for everyone to see." I switched the call from speakerphone to the handset and pressed the phone to my ear. "Hello, Sarah. This is Clara Peterson. I believe you know my husband, Mark, or as you call him, Michael Shaw." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line, followed by a stunned silence. I could picture her perfectly from her social media photos. Blonde, pretty, with kind eyes, sitting up in the bed she shared with my husband, the happy family photos on her nightstand mocking her. I don't understand," she stammered. "Michael's wife died. He's a widower." "Did he tell you that?" I asked, my voice softening with a pity I didn't know I was capable of feeling. "That I died in a car crash? How terribly convenient for him. I assure you I'm very much alive. I'm standing right in front of him, in the house he and I have shared for 8 years, celebrating our 10th wedding anniversary." A choked sob echoed down the line. Mark just stood there, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, his face a mask of agony. He was a puppet with his strings cut. "That's not possible," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We've been married for 8 years. We have a son." "I know," I said gently. "I've seen the pictures of Leo. He's a beautiful boy. He has his father's eyes." I looked directly at Mark as I said it, twisting the knife. "Listen to me, Sarah. The man you know as Michael Shaw has been living a double life. His real name is Mark Peterson. He works in finance here in Chicago. The business trips, the long weeks away, that was him coming home. To me." I let the horrific truth sink in on the other end of the line. I could hear her ragged breathing, the sound of a life shattering 1,000 miles away. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. This woman was a victim, just like me. But this wasn't about hurting her. It was about destroying him. It was about burning down the whole rotten structure so that nothing, not a single splinter, remained. "Put him on the phone," she finally said, her voice no longer soft but filled with a chilling, newfound strength. "Put my husband on the phone. Now." I held the phone out to Mark. "She wants to talk to you." He took it from me, his hand trembling so violently he almost dropped it. He lifted it to his ear, his eyes still locked on mine. "Sarah?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. I couldn't hear her side of the conversation anymore, but I didn't need to. I could see it all on his face. The initial barrage of questions, the accusations, the raw, guttural pain of her betrayal. His face contorted, shifting from pleading to defensive, then back to a state of complete brokenness. "It's not like that. I can explain. I was trapped. Please, just let me come home. We can talk about this." His pleas were pathetic, the desperate squirming of a worm on a hook. I turned away from him and walked to the sideboard, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I opened a drawer and took out a thick manila envelope. Inside was everything I had compiled over the last 48 hours. Copies of the fake ID, the secret bank statements, the deed to the Scottsdale condo, printouts of Sarah's social media pages, even a printout of a receipt for a child's bike from a toy store near her house, paid for with his secret credit card. On a weekend, he was supposedly at a conference in Vegas. I had been methodical. I had been thorough. He was still on the phone, his back to me now, his voice a low, desperate murmur. "I love you, you know that. It was a mistake I couldn't get out of. Of course, Leo is my son." "Don't say that." I walked back to the table and placed the envelope squarely in the center. He finished his call. Or rather, she finished it for him, likely by hanging up, and the silence that followed was deafening. He slowly turned around, his face ashen, his eyes hollowed out. He looked 10 years older than he had an hour ago. She hung up on me," he said, stating the obvious, his voice sounding dazed. "I imagine she did," I replied calmly. "I guess she's not as willing to work through it as you'd hoped. But don't worry, you have bigger problems now." He stared at the manila envelope. "What's that?" "That is my opening offer," I said. "My divorce settlement proposal. Inside, you'll find a list of my terms. They are not negotiable. You will sign over this house to me, free and clear. You will sign over 80% of your investment portfolio, your 401k, and your pension. You will also pay me a lump sum of $5 million in alimony. You have 24 hours to have your lawyer look it over and agree." He stared at me, aghast. $5 million? 80%? Clara, that's insane. That will ruin me. You can't ask for that. "Oh, I can," I said with a thin, cold smile, "and you will give it to me. Because the alternative is much, much worse. You see, I haven't just been talking to Sarah. I also made a copy of everything in that envelope. And I took the liberty of looking up the board of directors for your firm. I have their home addresses. I have their emails. I even have the direct line for Andrew Thompson, your boss, the man who prides himself on his company's family values image." His jaw dropped. He understood immediately. His entire career was built on an image of stability, reliability, and trustworthiness. This scandal wouldn't just be embarrassing, it would be catastrophic. "You wouldn't," he breathed, a new kind of fear in his eyes. This wasn't about losing a wife anymore. This was about losing everything. "Try me," I challenged. "You have 24 hours to choose, Mark. Option A, you give me what I want, I disappear from your life forever, and you're left to salvage whatever you can of your other family and your career. Or option B, you fight me, and I send a copy of this little package to your entire professional world. I will go on the news if I have to. I will become the most famous wronged wife in Chicago. I will scorch the earth." He stumbled back, leaning against the table for support, his chest heaving. He was trapped. Utterly and completely trapped. And he knew it. He stared at the envelope as if it contained his death sentence. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice dropping to an almost conversational tone. "I did a little more digging after I found out about Leo. You see, Sarah listed his birth date on one of her posts, March 12th, 7 years ago. I paused, letting the date hang in the air. I remember that day, Mark. I remember it very clearly because that was the day of my mother's funeral, the day I called you, sobbing, begging you to leave your business trip and come home because I needed you, and you told me you couldn't. You said the deal was too important. I took a step closer, my eyes burning into his. You weren't closing a deal, were you? You were at the hospital. You were holding your son for the first time while I was burying my mother alone. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and the sound it made was the shattering of whatever minuscule, pathetic fragment of a man remained before me. His face, already a canvas of shock and despair, contorted into a mask of pure, abject horror. It wasn't just the exposure of his lies anymore, it was the collision of his two worlds in the most profane way imaginable. My deepest grief had been the backdrop to his greatest joy. The memory of that day, the cold rain, the smell of lilies and damp earth, the crushing loneliness was seared into my soul. For me, it was the end of a world. For him, it was the beginning of a new one. No, he whispered, shaking his head frantically as if he could physically dislodge the truth. No, it wasn't. I didn't. Clara, I didn't know. You didn't know? I let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. You didn't know the woman you were sleeping with was 9 months pregnant? You didn't know she was going into labor. Don't you dare lie to me now, Mark. Not about this. I know you were there. Sarah posted a picture. It was dated March 13th. The caption read, "Welcome to the world, Leo. Your daddy and I are so in love. He stayed by my side the whole 18 hours. You were with her while I was picking out a casket." He staggered back, his hand flying to his chest as if he couldn't breathe. He finally collapsed into his chair, the same one he'd sat in an hour ago to toast our future. He buried his face in his hands, and a dry, ragged sob tore from his throat. It was a sound of absolute self-destruction, the sound of a man seeing his own reflection for the first time and being disgusted by the monster staring back. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just a vast cold emptiness. The fire of my rage had burned so hot that it had consumed everything, leaving only ashes. I looked at the pathetic, weeping figure, the man I had loved more than life itself, and I felt nothing at all. He was a ghost at a feast, a bad memory I was ready to erase. "The clock is ticking, Mark," I said, my voice as flat and gray as a winter sky. 24 hours. You know my terms." I turned my back on him then. I walked out of the dining room, my heels clicking a steady, resolute rhythm on the hardwood floor. I didn't look back. I walked through the living room, past the photos of our life together, our wedding, our travels, our smiling faces, and they were like pictures of strangers. I went up the grand, sweeping staircase, my hand trailing on the cool, smooth banister. Each step was a step away from him, a step away from the lie. In our bedroom, my bedroom, I pulled a pre-packed suitcase from the closet. I hadn't known exactly how tonight would go, but I knew I wouldn't be sleeping in this bed again. I had packed the essentials: clothes, toiletries, my real passport, and a folder containing all the original documents from his secret drawer. I did a final sweep of the room, grabbing my jewelry box from the dresser and my laptop from the desk. As I was about to close the suitcase, my eyes landed on the framed photo on my nightstand. It was from our honeymoon in Italy. We were on a balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast, young and stupidly happy, the whole world at our feet. The woman in that picture believed in forevers. She believed in the man whose arm was wrapped so tightly around her. I felt a pang of pity for her naive, trusting heart. I picked up the frame, opened the back, and slid the photo out. I looked at his smiling face one last time. Then I tore it neatly in half, letting the two pieces flutter into the wastebasket. I kept the half with my face on it and tucked it into my purse, a reminder of who I was before him and who I could be again. I zipped the suitcase and walked back downstairs. He was still in the dining room, exactly where I'd left him, head in his hands. The candles had burned down, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. The scene looked macabre, like the aftermath of a crime, which I suppose it was. I walked to the front door without a word. My hand was on the doorknob when his voice, thick and broken, stopped me. "Clara, wait." I paused but didn't turn around. "What?" "Where will you go?" he asked, his voice small. "That's no longer your concern," I said, my voice cold. "All you need to be concerned with is having your lawyer contact mine first thing in the morning. Her name is Diane Finch. Her card is in the envelope." "Please," he begged, and I heard the sound of his chair scraping as he stood. "Don't do this. Don't throw away 10 years. We can salvage something." I finally turned to face him then, one last time. He looked like a shipwreck, his clothes rumpled, his face blotchy and tear-streaked. The handsome, powerful man was gone, replaced by this hollow shell. "There's nothing to salvage, Mark," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "You didn't just break our vows. You built a monument on their grave. A monument with a wife and a son. You talk about 10 years? You stole 10 years from me. And you stole 8 years from Sarah. And you stole a whole life from that little boy who has to grow up knowing his father is a liar and a cheat. The only thing you can do now is pay for the damage." I opened the door. The cool night air felt like a baptism. It was the first clean breath I'd taken in 48 hours. "Goodbye, Mark," I said. And I walked out, closing the door softly behind me. I didn't slam it. This wasn't a moment for theatrics. It was an ending. Quiet, decisive, and absolute. I walked down the stone path to my car, parked in the circular driveway. I tossed my suitcase in the back, got in, and started the engine. I didn't look back at the house, at the warm lights glowing in the windows, a perfect picture of a perfect life that never truly existed. I just drove. I had no destination in mind, just a need for distance. I drove through the sleeping suburban streets, then onto the highway, the city lights of Chicago receding in my rearview mirror. An hour passed, maybe 2. My mind was eerily quiet. The storm had passed, leaving a strange, placid calm in its wake. I was free. It was a terrifying, exhilarating thought. My phone, which had been silent, buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced at the screen. It was a number I didn't recognize, with an Arizona area code. My heart gave a slight lurch. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, putting it on speaker. "Hello? Is this Clara?" It was Sarah's voice. It was shaky, but the chilling strength I'd heard earlier was still there. "Yes, it is," I said, my eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. There was a pause, and I could hear her take a ragged breath. I just wanted to thank you." The words surprised me. "Thank me for what?" "For telling me the truth," she said. "He never would have. He would have let me live the rest of my life as a lie." There was another pause. I kicked him out. I told him if he ever comes near me or Leo again, I'll call the police. I changed the locks. "Good," I said simply. "Listen," she said, her voice dropping slightly, becoming more urgent. "There's something else, something I think you need to know. When I was yelling at him, throwing his things out, a piece of paper fell out of his briefcase. It wasn't about us. It was about his company. I think he's in some kind of trouble, Clara. Serious trouble." A new kind of coldness, sharp and unfamiliar, pricked at the edges of my numb calm. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, my knuckles whitening on the steering wheel. I was heading for a clean break, a simple, brutal amputation. Complications were the last thing I needed. "I don't understand all of it," Sarah said, her voice a hurried whisper, as if she was afraid he might somehow overhear her from 1,000 miles away. It looked like a memo, something from their internal risk assessment department. It was talking about a subsidiary, a fund they managed. It mentioned gross mismanagement, falsified performance reports, and potential investor fraud. His name, Mark Peterson, was all over it. It looked like he was the one managing the fund. Investor fraud. The words hung in the air inside my car, dense and suffocating. Suddenly, the lavish life Mark had built, our life, his other life, seemed less like the product of a successful career and more like a house of cards built on a foundation of stolen money. The $5 million alimony, the 80% of his assets. What if there was nothing there? What if it was all just smoke and mirrors, a Potemkin village funded by other people's life savings? "Sarah, do you still have that paper?" I asked, my mind racing, shifting from the emotional devastation to cold, hard strategy. The wronged wife was receding, and the pragmatic woman who had once helped Mark prep for his business school exams was taking over. "Yes," she said. "I took a picture of it with my phone before he could grab it." "Can you send it to me?" I asked. "Right now. It's important." "Of course," she said without hesitation. We were strangers, bound by the betrayal of one man, and in that moment we were allies. "Clara, I'm sorry for all of this. I never would have—" "I know," I said, and for the first time I truly meant it. "None of this was your fault. It was his. Go be with your son, Sarah. Be strong for him." We hung up, and a minute later, my phone pinged. The image was clear. I pulled over at the next brightly lit gas station, the hum of the engine a low thrum against the quiet night. I zoomed in on the document. It was exactly as she'd described. A damning internal report dated 3 weeks prior, detailing a massive hole in a high-yield investment fund he managed. It outlined how he had been using funds from new investors to pay out returns to earlier ones, a classic Ponzi scheme. The report recommended his immediate suspension and a full forensic audit. He hadn't just been lying to me and Sarah, he'd been lying to everyone. The vow renewal wasn't a romantic gesture, it was a desperate act of theater. He needed to shore up his image as a stable, successful family man right before the world came crashing down. He was trying to lock me in, to keep the illusion going for as long as possible. The $5 million demand wasn't just punitive anymore. It was a race against the clock. I had to get what I was owed before the entire empire crumbled, and there was nothing left but debt and federal charges. I didn't drive to a hotel. I drove to my lawyer's office. Diane Finch was a shark, the best and most ruthless divorce attorney in the city, and she owed me a favor. I called her on the way, waking her from a dead sleep. By the time I arrived at her sleek downtown office building at 2 a.m., she was waiting for me, a cup of coffee in hand and a grimly determined look on her face. We worked through the night. The picture from Sarah was the key. It changed everything from a messy, emotional divorce into a high-stakes financial negotiation with a ticking bomb at its center. Diane's team, roused from their beds by her urgent calls, began digging. They were legal bloodhounds, and they had the scent. At 8:59 a.m., 1 minute before my deadline expired, Mark's lawyer called Diane. He sounded blustering and indignant, calling my demands extortionate and laughable. He was following the standard playbook. Diane let him finish. Then, in her calm, lethal voice, she said, "Tell your client that we have a copy of the OmniVest Fund internal risk assessment memo from 3 weeks ago. Tell him that if we don't have a signed and notarized settlement agreement matching our exact terms on my desk by noon, a copy of that memo, along with a detailed timeline of his bigamy and fraudulent activities, will be messengered to the SEC and the U.S. Attorney's Office. You have 3 hours." The silence on the other end of the line was, I imagined, profound. The agreement arrived at 11:42 a.m. It was all there. He had caved completely. The house, the assets, the $5 million. He knew he was ruined either way, but this way he was buying himself a sliver of a chance, a few days head start before the official investigation inevitably caught up with him. He was choosing financial ruin over immediate federal prison. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork. I sold the house. that grand monument to a lie, and didn't even bother to pack most of the contents. I let the new owners have it all. It was their dream, not mine. I watched from the sidelines as the news broke. Mark Peterson, a rising star in the financial world, was fired, then investigated, then indicted. His name and face were plastered everywhere. The story of his complex deception, both personal and professional, becoming a cautionary tale for the city's elite. He lost everything: his job, his reputation, his money. He lost both his families in a single night. One afternoon, a month after it all ended, I was sitting in a small cafe finalizing a wire transfer. On an impulse, I had looked up Sarah Shaw and found a GoFundMe page set up by her friends. It was to help with her and Leo's living expenses and legal fees, as she was now entangled in the financial fallout. I wired $1 million to the fund, anonymously. It wasn't guilt money. It was for the boy with his father's eyes. He, at least, deserved a fresh start. My passport arrived the next day, crisp and new. I looked at my photo, and for the first time in a long time, I recognized the woman staring back at me. There was a strength in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a clarity. I booked a one-way ticket to Florence, a place I had always wanted to go, a place Mark had always dismissed as too cliché. Sitting in my window seat, watching the patchwork of America shrink below me, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I hadn't just divorced a man. I had exorcised a ghost. I had walked through fire and come out the other side, not unscathed, but cleansed. Mark had wanted to renew our vows, a promise for a future based on lies. Instead, I had renewed myself, and as the plane banked east, flying into the sunrise, I smiled. My future was a blank page, an unwritten story in a language I was excited to learn. And I was the only author.